The O'Reilly factor, Bill O'Reilly. Bill, I want to talk to you about the New York Times editorial, but first I want to get some idea. You have an enormously successful radio show. Do your listeners frame this issue with Senator Obama as race or judgment and candor? Because those are two very different concepts.
I think if you had to add up the callers, most of them are on the anti-Americanism factor rather than the race factor. You talk about race today a little bit. African Americans are more concerned with the race, generally speaking, and white Americans are more concerned with the anti-American. And look, you sit there and you listen to this stuff, and shouldn't you confront it if you're a sitting senator? So I think there's a little divide there, but both topics are very hot, Greta.
All right, now, in light of that, when you read the New York Times editorial, do you see that editorial, which they have entitled Profiles in Courage, do you see that as an editorial that addresses that anti-American issue that you mentioned, or is it simply about race?
Well, you gotta look. All the left-wing newspapers, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Chicago Sun-Times, Kansas City Star, I mean, they're all Obama rooters, and whatever Obama does, they're going to like. Okay, so that's number one. NBC News, on television, CNN, they're all in the tank for Obama, and they have been. So he's their guy, and they're going to put forth their spin that he's brilliant and this, that, and the other thing. People just should know that. I'm not saying you agree or disagree with it, but you should know where they're coming from. Now, the New York Times, they basically feel that under the Bush administration, Greta, we are a bad country. They feel that. They believe that. Those loons over there at the New York Times that type up these editorials, they believe at this juncture in history, the United States of America is bad. So they're not as concerned as regular folks are about this Jeremiah Wright deal. They didn't even cover it for 3 days, Greta. They didn't even cover it. They were forced to cover it, but they didn't want to cover it. Go ahead.
Senator Obama has denounced what Reverend Wright said, and I guess the reason why I started asking if they were concerned with candor is because it wasn't until now, and that's actually specifically mentioned. I think the New York Times did say that he hesitated uncomfortably long to address it, but that it took,
because the New York Times wasn't addressing it, and the Obama campaign people said maybe it'll go away if we can just get that O'Reilly guy out of the picture, because it was last Thursday on this program that we broke this wide. And their calculation was for Barack Obama, look, we don't know if O'Reilly can carry this story into the published consciousness, because we got CNN, we got the network news, and we got the newspapers pretty much carrying our water, and they're not going to make a big deal out of it. So let's lay low and see how it turns out. Well, you saw how it turned out. So that's why there was the delay. They were trying to see if the folks would get engaged, and the folks did.
Well, I guess then we go back to my first question. The whole issue is that with your listeners is candor. Should he have addressed it sooner? Not the question of race, because I believe racism does exist in this country, but I'm curious whether the whole idea that they waited until now to do this, whether candor is something that...
Yeah, should he have got out in front of it because he knew that this was a hand grenade?
And does it matter? And is that important?
But here's the problem, Greta. He doesn't have a real good answer for hanging for 20 years in the pew. That's the problem. His answer isn't real good. Now, I accept him at his word that he had a personal relationship, and this pastor led him to Jesus, and he respects the pastor's spiritual side, and the pastor helps him. I got all that. But you can do that in private. You don't have to sit there as a sitting senator and lend your credibility and stature to this guy telling everybody Al-Qaeda is no worse than the United States. So he didn't have a good answer to get out in front of it. So they decided to try to gamble that it wouldn't become a big issue. And it wouldn't have become a big issue if those tapes didn't surface.
Are your radio show listeners, do they say, look, I'll still vote for him, or now I've changed my mind, or,
here's how it shakes down.
He has many attributes besides that?
Here's how it shakes down at this moment in time. Gallup poll today, tracking poll, says Hillary Clinton has picked up 5 points in 3 days, and Obama's down 8 points. So Hillary Clinton's now beating him nationwide, okay? However, Obama's core support is not eroded. It's about what it was. But the people who are leaning toward him, independents, have big-time problems now. 36% of independents say that after this story, they don't think as highly of Obama as they did. So Core support, he hasn't lost. Independents who are leaning toward him, he has, and there are now a lot more doubts about the man.
All right, then at the top of the hour, Bill O'Reilly, the O'Reilly Factor, they'll hear a lot more about
Yeah, don't miss the show tonight, Greta. This is really a hot show tonight.
It always is. What do you mean? It always is. But I won't miss it. Anyway, thank you, Bill.
Okay, Greta, anytime.
Coming up, you're logged on to GretaWire.com.